Hi, my name is Gene Arnold from Jaspersoft. In this video, I'll be discussing token-based authentication. Let's first start by discussing what exactly token-based authentication is regarding JasperReports Server. One might use token-based authentication when they want to embed JasperReports Server inside of their existing application, creating a seamless reporting and BI integration. Here are the possible steps that could be taken. A user first logs into your application with their credentials. Now, from within your application, this same user tries to access a report or anything related to JasperReports Server. Your app will generate a token in an understood format, either encrypted or plain text, and pass it to JasperReports Server. The token will include lots of information about this user and send it over to JasperReports Server. If JasperReports Server sees the token is valid, the user will be created inside of the repository database. The user is now granted access to that required area of JasperReports Server. So what does this token actually look like? Your application is required to format a token that will be sent to JasperReports Server. In this token, the following pieces of information should be sent: the username, roles the user is part of, their organization, expire time, any profile attributes attached to the user. Let me show you what an actual token looks like and give you more details around what can be added into each section of these segments. Here is a properly formatted token that can be sent into JasperReports Server and used for authentication. This token would create an authenticated user named Sven. He has the role of a manager and is part of the sales organization that is a sub-organization of the EMEA organization. He also has a profile attribute of Sweden. So you can see the following. The U parameter takes the username. R takes a comma-separated value for all of the roles that you'd like to send in that are attached to this user. O takes the organization that the user is part of. It can actually take a list and it will create a hierarchy based on the values sent in. EXP is used to send in the expiration time to avoid the token from lasting forever. The PA1 will map a profile attribute that will be assigned to the specific user. Any number of profile attributes can be assigned and placed inside of the token. You will see all these used in just a moment, which might help you better understand how this works. I'd like to show you 3 examples of how this type of authentication works. First, I'll show you the most basic method of testing this out by simply attaching the token to the URL of the JasperReports server and logging directly into JasperReports server. Next, I'll give you an example of using a token in an iframe. Finally, I'll show you an example of using this method along with visualize.js, our JavaScript API. Before we test out and log in with our token, I logged into JasperReports Server as super user. I wanted to show you the list of organizations that are currently inside of the application right now. Currently, there's only the out-of-the-box organization, organization_1. When we log in with our token, we'll come back into this section and you'll see that more organizations will be added to this list. I've placed the following token at the end of a qualified URL to log into JasperReports Server. Notice that the token is being placed in the PP parameter of this URL. PP stands for Principal Parameter and will be discussed later in this video. The token can be encrypted at this point if needed, but we'll send it in as plain text for this example. With the token attached to the URL, our user S. Wood will be granted access into JasperReports Server. Let's look at this user and see the information created inside of JasperReports Server. I'll click Enter now and log this user into JasperReports Server using token-based authentication. Notice in the upper right-hand corner, the S. Wood user has been logged into JasperReports Server. The first thing you should note about this user is that they have administrative rights. This is accomplished by role mapping that you will learn about later in the video. Now, since this user has admin rights, we can take a look at the user information inside of the system. Notice that there's a new organization added to the system. This organization is called West. You don't see the organization _1 right now because S. Wood isn't an administrator of organization S1. This user is only an administrator of the West organization, and that's why, of course, you only see that organization in the list. Also notice that this organization has 2 users created inside of it. This is because JasperReports Server creates a Jasper admin account every time a new organization is created. I'll show you how this is done later on in the video. If we highlight and analyze the S. Wood user, we can gather some great information. Notice that the user is flagged as an external user. This is because the user was synced into the system externally rather than created internally. Also notice the roles that this user has. Role_administrator was mapped to this user because the user has the role_admin assigned to it within inside of the token. Role_user is a default role assigned to any newly created users. You'll see how these roles are assigned in more detail when we actually get into the configuration file. Now let's log in as another user using our HTTP API with inside of an iframe. For this example, the following token will be used while logging in via an iframe. The details of getting into the HTTP API is out of the scope of this video, though I will be using this API and passing in a token to get into JasperReports Server. So notice when I click on the library button, I pass in the following URL, and this section of the product is displayed in an iframe with inside of my example. If I click on the ad hoc view button, again, another URL is passed with a token, and the user is sent to the ad hoc view section of the product. If a user is logged out by passing in a parameter that does officially log out the user, and I try to move to an area with inside of the product, basically passing in a URL without a token, I'm simply sent back to the login screen. I can click the Not Logged In button all day long trying to move into JasperReports Server, but since I'm not logged in, I can go no further than the login screen. This is an example of passing a token inside of a URL within our HTTP API and granting different access to JasperReports Server. Now let's log into JasperReports Server as a super user and show you some information about the user that was logged in via this token. After logging into JasperReports Server as a super user and clicking on the Manage User option, I can see user information inside of the system. I highlighted the West region and also highlighted the B. Wang user. You'll see that this user is also an externally defined user. This user was created in our previous example using a token in our HTTP API displayed within inside of an iframe. As for the roles for this user, they are the following. ext_sales, which was synced in via the token, and role_user, which is a default role assigned to all users. Different than our last user, S. Wood, you can see that B. Wang has a profile attribute assigned. The attribute is named team name, and the value is team_A. This attribute was synced in via the token and can be used for various security settings. Finally, let's log in one last time as another user using visualize.js. In this example, we'll be using the following token. Just like with our HTTP API example, getting into the details is really out of the scope of this video, but I will log in as the following user, S. Anderson, with the password of password. When I click on Submit, not only am I logging into my application, I'm requesting information from JasperReports Server. This information was requested via our visualize.js or our JavaScript API. The information that was requested was a list of all of the reports that this user is allowed to view. I can click on any of these reports now, making another call into JasperReports Server, and the report will be displayed in my application. Every time I access another area of JasperReports Server, my token will be passed, and I'll be granted information to that area of the product if of course I have rights to view that section of JasperReports Server. Now let's log into JasperReports Server one last time as super user and take a look at our list of users and how this token affected that list. Just like before, I'll log in as super user so we can check out the S. Anderson user. Notice that this user is part of a different organization. Our last two users were placed in the West organization, but this user was placed inside of the Central organization. Organization information can be passed inside of the token and can be different for every user. This is one of the major benefits of using JasperReports Server in a multi-tenant environment. JasperReports Server supports multi-tenancy out of the box and is a great match for any SaaS-based applications. This user is also flagged as an external user, just like all the others. When it comes to roles, we have the following: ext_marketing, which was synced in via our token, and role_user, which is our default role. The S. Anderson user received the following profile attribute: team_B. This is because this was passed in via the token, much like our B. Wang user. Now that you've seen token-based authentication in action, let's learn how this all works and what's required on your end to set it up. Within your installer directory of JasperReports Server, you'll find a folder called external auth-sample-config. The system ships with various authentication setup samples to make implementing authentication easier. For our needs, we'll need to be choosing the sample application context -external auth-preauth-mt.xml file. This file needs to be copied to where JasperReports Server is installed. I'll be right-clicking on this file and choosing Copy. With the file copied, it will need to be placed in the following directory: your application server. In my case, I'm using Tomcat. Generally, you'll then move into the Web Apps directory, Jasper Server Pro, and finally the web-inf folder. Since I have multiple installs of JasperReports Server on my system, this is why you see the JRS_62, the JRS_63_beta, and of course the JRS_621. The odds are in your system, you'll find just a single name and it'll be called Tomcat. After the file is copied into that specific directory, the web-inf folder, it will need to be renamed to application context-external auth-preauth-mt.xml. Now that the file is copied to the proper location and renamed, open it up in your favorite text editor. This file is closer to being set up than you might think. Let me go and highlight some of the areas that I think you should know about. The first section I want to cover is located near line number 22, and it's a property called Principal Parameter. Earlier, you saw an example of a token, and I mentioned that the token is sent into JasperReports Server inside of this PP parameter. Here's where the parameter is labeled and can be changed. No real need to change this, but it still is good information to know about, and if you had to change it, you now know where to go. A little further down the page, at line number 31, is a property called Token Decryptor. This token contains a bean that offers you the ability to enter in a class that will be used to decrypt the token when sent to JasperReports Server. It's extremely common to use encrypted tokens rather than plain text when you're using JasperReports Server in a production system. Out of the box, this is set to a plain text decoder and does not attempt to decrypt the token. Line number 33 shows a commented out bean that points to a demo class I use for proof of concept work. This class is not provided to you, but it is an example of how you would enter in another class name within this bean. There's more information about this inside of the Authentication Cookbook. Now let's move to a bean called Pre-Authenticated Manager, located near line number 54. This is the section of the file that is used to set up all the parameters that are named inside of the token. Just like with the PP parameter that you've seen so far, no need to change any of these, but it still is good information to know about. The only part of this section that might get adjusted is the Profile Attributes section. Here you set up the key value pair entries for all of the attributes that might be found inside of a token. At this point, we need to move to a section of the file that will get most of your attention. Near line number 110, there's a bean called MT External User Setup Processor. Within this bean, you'll set up how roles will be assigned to your users. Line number 115 in my file starts the role mapping settings. Notice that if JasperReports Server finds the role JRS_admin assigned to any of the users, it will automatically map the role_administrator. This is exactly how the user S. Wood became an admin within JasperReports Server. Now moving to line number 127 in my file, you will see the section used to assign the default roles that get created and assigned to all of your users. Here you can see how the role_user was assigned to any newly created users. This section accepts a list and can have as many roles as you'd like. The last part that may need your attention in this section of the file is the permitted roles regex section. Here you create regex expressions that act as gates, allowing in only accepted roles. Though my expressions are rather simple in this example, you can create some rather complex and creative expressions to help filter out unneeded roles. The last bean in this configuration file that we'll be discussing is the External Tenant Setup Processor bean, located near line number 142. There are two primary things this bean handles for you. First, within the property named Organization Map, you can map organization values that come in via the token to existing organizations inside of JasperReports Server. This is very helpful when you want to organize multiple organizations into one. The second item will fall under the External Tenant Setup Users property. Within this property, you can set up a list of default users that are created when a new organization is built. You can also assign the roles that are added to these users. This is how the Jasper admin user is created each time a new organization is built, and how this user is granted the role_administrator, and the role_user. Once you've completed making your changes to the configuration file, you'll need to save this file and then restart your Java application. Either restart Tomcat completely or just restart the JasperReports Server application. For more information about authenticating with Jaspersoft, find your way over to the Jaspersoft community and click on the Docs tab. Within this section, you'll find lots of valuable information, including the TIPCO JasperReports Server Authentication Cookbook. Once again, this is Gene Arnold from Jaspersoft. I certainly hope you enjoyed this video, and I thank you for watching.